Russia, December 29, 1922. The idea of a Solidarity Association for revolutionaries exposed to repression is launched. Soon the idea was taken over by the Communist International. At its first conference, the Red Eight defines its policy, and I quote, particularly emphasizes the political significance of the Red Eight as one of the most important levers of the United Front to attract the broad masses of workers and farmers without distinction of party to the solidarity with the imprisoned revolutionary fighters. The organization, therefore, wants to be as open as possible and opens to socialists and anarchists, despite its centralized structure. Julian Markievski, a co-founder in 1893 with Rosa Luxemburg from the Socialist Party of Poland, who had taken part in the 1905 revolution, was one of the co-founders of the Spartacus League in Germany and would be the first president of the Red Eight. When Julian Markievski died in 1925, Red Eight had branches in Germany, Austria, Bulgaria, Spain, France, Great Britain, Mexico, Norway, the Netherlands, Poland, Sweden, Soviet Union, and even in the USA.
So
1919-1920, the years of crisis in the United States. Mass strikes result in bloody clashes with police and employers' militias in several cities. Many strikers were killed. In retaliation, bombs explode at the mayor's office in Seattle and Cleveland. A car bomb explodes in Wall Street, resulting in 38 dead and 200 wounded. This unleashed a repression against the anarchists, but also against trade unionists, communists, and American socialists. Some were imprisoned, others forced into exile.
some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses. Some of those that...
Bill Haywood, one of the leaders of the Colorado's Miners Federation and of International Workers of the World, is convicted to 14 years imprisonment for spying, but actually for opposing to the entry of the US into the war in 1916. Haywood took refuge in Soviet Russia and was actively involved in the international Red Eight activities. On May 1920, two Italian anarchists, Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, are arrested, imprisoned for robbery. They were sentenced to death July 14, 1921, despite the lack of evidence. A solidarity movement is developing and the Red Eight plays a leading role. May 26, 1926, a gangster from his cell confesses being the author of the robbery, but justice just refuses to consider these confessions. Despite extensive international mobilization and multiple postponements of the execution, Sacco and Vanzetti were executed on the electric chair the night of 22 August to 23, 1927, sparking an immense outrage. In 1927, China was shaken by major revolutionary waves against the warlords who are tearing the country apart. The Communist Party made an alliance with the Nationalist Party Kuomintang, whose troops, led by Chiang Kai-shek, advanced on Shanghai. At that moment, the city was controlled by a general linked to English and French imperialists. The Communist Party organized and managed a workers' insurrection.
Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses. Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses. Some of those that work forces...
But when Chiang Kai-shek's troops entered the city, they turned against workers' forces. Thousands of political and trade union activists are murdered, and Red Aid campaigned for the victims of repression. Clara Zetkin chairs the Red Aid at the death of Julian Markievski. Feminist and opponent to the World War I, participant to the Spartacus League and the Second International, then member of the German Communist Party, she will lead the International Red Aid until her death. The first International Congress was held in Moscow in November 1932, at the event of the 10th anniversary of the International Red Aid. At that time, Red Aid accounts for 71 national sections, totaling 14 million members. These different sections were mobilized to support workers' struggles, political prisoners and their families, and to organize commemorations for the strikers killed by the police. The case in Adelens, Sweden, could be used as an example. During a general strike in May 1931, the army took the side of the strikebreakers by shooting into the crowd, killing 5 strikers. Same case in Roux, Belgium, 10th of July 1932. The state police, facing the miners, opens fire at the order of the socialist city councillor and kills Louis Tayen, a local worker. A year after, Red Aid called for a rally to pay tribute to Louis Tayen. 10,000 people attended. This event is filmed by Jean Fontaine, and the commemoration of Tayen's death is taking place each year. In 1931, 9 young workers aged 13 to 19 were charged for raping 2 white women in Alabama. One of the women will later admit that police officers had forced them to accuse blacks or to themselves be charged for vagrancy. 8 of the 9 defendants were sentenced to death at the end of a rather caricatural trial. The crowd celebrated the verdict in front of the court to the sound of the Ku Klux Klan's orchestra. The International Labour Defense, which is the American branch of Red Aid, decided to denounce this judgment, the aim being to gather black and white workers against racial injustice. The ILD lawyers obtained a new trial, and for the first time in Alabama, blacks accused of raping a white woman escaped the electric chair. Nevertheless, they had to serve long prison sentences. International Red Aid will give this case a global impact, what resulted in a decisive step in the fight against segregation in the USA. Autumn 1934. Proletarian insurrections take place in Madrid, Catalonia and Asturias. In the first 2 cases, the counter-revolution triumphs quite easily. However, Soviets are organized by anarchists, communist and socialist insurgents in the Asturias mining region. This uprising culminated in October 1934, when the Miners' Red Army controlled a territory of some 1,000 square kilometers around Oviedo and the south of the city. The colonial army bloodily suppressed the uprising. The repression that follows, ordered by the government, is terrible. 1,000 dead, 20,000 prisoners, for whom the International Red Aid campaigns. The danger that fascism represents significantly increased responsibilities, tasks, but also the echo and popularity of International Red Aid. New national sections appear, while those not suffering directly from the fascist repression, as in Poland, Italy, and soon in Spain and Germany, are actually booming. In France, staying into the logic of the Popular Front, Red Aid becomes Secours Populaire Français. The Red Aid campaigns to denounce Nazi crimes, as well as those requiring the discharge of communist militants Dimitrov and Thalmann, had a great impact. The Thalmann Committee, established in Paris, March 1934, organized a number of meetings bringing together a total of more than 100,000 people in 1935. Thousands of political militants and workers need to flee fascist Germany and Italy. Red Aid hosts them, helps them to find work and lodgings, and organizes departure for many of them to the USSR. In Moscow, they are welcomed in the House of Political Migrants, which is depending from International Red Aid. When the fascist military uprising triggered the civil war in Spain, July 17, 1936, Red Aid is the first in line to help Republican Spain. In France, Mexico, Switzerland, Great Britain, actually in the whole world, Red Aid members are collecting food, clothing and medical supplies to be sent to Spain by rail and boatloads. In Spain during the war, the Spanish, Basque and Catalan Red Aid are of tremendous importance. Artists and intellectuals close to Red Aid write books and produce film documentaries to expose the anti-fascist cause, such as the film about the defense of Madrid. Another picture denounces a phenomenon previously unknown, the bombing of civilian populations.
Para ellos, las personas que no caen bajo el látigo de su poder salvaje internacional, que con sus puestos de socorro y sus hospitales de sangre, con sus atenciones para las bravas milicias, por su protección sobre mujeres y sus niños, apoya con todo su aliento y su fuerza la gesta gloriosa del pueblo madrileño, dice que de nada le servirán sus inútiles crímenes al fascismo. No pasarán.
The main activity of the Spanish Red Aid was to give assistance to the children and families of the anti-fascist fighters. They also created 275 hospitals, blood transfusion centers, mobile clinics and dental offices. The cultural, political, medical and social role of Red Aid will continue throughout the war, and its members will be victims of severe repression after the victory of the fascists.
Forces draw the same that burn crosses. Killing in the name of. Killing in the name of.
At that time in Germany, the Red Aid suffered some Nazi repression. By the thousands, members were sent to concentration camps. Many will be executed, as Johanna Kirchner, who had been imprisoned by Vichy and handed over to the Gestapo in 1942. Johanna Kirchner is one of the few leaders of the Red Aid originating from the Socialist Party. The German Red Aid maintains a clandestine activity consisting in the assistance to political prisoners and their families. Wilhelm Beutel rebuilt the underground Red Aid, but was arrested by the Gestapo in 1943 and executed in 1944. 1941 in Brussels, the Independent Front, created in clandestinity, will regroup all of the anti-Hitler resistance, with the exception, of course, of the Catholic Royalist right wing. In 1942, the Independent Front creates an organization for victims and their families. victims of Nazi repression, for recusants to forced labour, illegals, prosecuted and others. It will be called Solidarity. Red Aid dissolves in this new larger organisation.
Do what they told ya. And now you do what they told ya. And now you do what they told ya. And now you do what they told ya.
In the 70s, in the midst of growing struggles in Europe, in order to help the militants arrested during demonstrations and strikes, Red Aid groups are created in several countries. These groups were generally constituted of militants, of front organizations and intellectual supporters. Such a rebuilding occurred in France under the chairmanship of the former commander of the Communist Armed Resistance, expelled from the Communist Party, Charles Tillion, and Jean-Paul Sartre's membership. Dario Fo and Franca Rame participated in the Italian Red Aid, and Sergio Spazzali, who died in exile in Paris, himself a lawyer of Red Brigades and also a communist militant. Unfortunately, the 70s Red Aid groups will dissolve one after the other one because of political divergences, repression and the general undertow of struggles. Only the German Red Aid passes this episode and keeps their activity to date.
Do what they told ya. And now you 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 do what they told ya. Those who died are justified for wearing the badge and your chosen white. You're justified. Those that died for wearing the badge and your chosen white. Those who died are justified for wearing the badge and your chosen white. You're justified. Those who died for wearing the badge and your chosen white. Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses.
At the initiative and invitation of the Spanish Red Aid in December 2000, a first meeting for the reconstruction of the International Red Aid is held in Lyon. Delegates of solidarity groups from Spain, Belgium, France, Switzerland and Italy are participating. The Commission and the platform for an International Red Aid were created during this meeting. At the Commission's initiative for Red Aid, the first international conference of Basel was held in November 2005, where 42 delegates from 25 organizations coming from 7 different countries participated at this first conference that will later become regular meetings. The International Red Aid leads solidarity campaigns such as the campaign for the revolutionary long-time prisoners like George Abdallah and Marko Kamenic, the solidarity campaign with collective political prisoners for PCPM in Italy, and revolutionary struggle in Greece. In addition to the campaigns, International Red Aid is also a framework where reflections are conducted, studies are carried out, and know-how is shared. The Red Aid activists are regularly themselves a police target. Militants were imprisoned in recent years in Germany, Spain, Belgium and Switzerland. In Spain, Red Aid is now illegal. This repression is added to other difficulties inherent to the coordination of the transformation of independent groups into a centralized organization. As they all are forces with history, political culture, militants' realities, and lots of very different struggles, we need to move forward gradually, not making a new step after having tested the strength of the previous step. Thus, we have together provided 15 years of international revolutionary solidarity activity, and that's why we can be here today.
Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Motherfucker!